couple days ago I made a gear progression guide for leagues for RuneScape 3, and this is a companion video for that. This is to help newer players to figure out what bosses to do next. But before we start with this video, I want to straighten a couple mistakes I made in the last one. Especially with melee, the Reaver familiar will be extremely good and compete with the Ripper Demon. I'm not exactly sure if it's gonna be better than a cog, but it is gonna be a great familiar to just have passively without much effort. And another mistake with melee I made, I didn't consider the Laonaiaka Spear. It is a tier 80 spear that has damage of a tier 90 weapon and the accuracy of a tier 75 weapon, which in leagues means that it functions as a tier 90 weapon with a poison buff. So this means that an alternate progression path for melee is to skip everything, get a Dragon Halberd and go to Rex Matriarchs. I would highly discourage against this because you won't be learning from the earlier game bosses, but if you're already experienced in RuneScape 3, then yes, this is the best path to go. Okay, onto the boss progression and kind of goals you can aim for PvM wise. I want to start out easy with some bosses that don't really do much, but you can start doing kind of small damage rotations on them. These would be God Wars 1 bosses. Just pick the one that fits your style, like if you're maging, go Krill. If you're doing melee, go Bandos. That kind of makes sense, right? Then early on, I would recommend you do some barrows, so you get the amulet, so you get one of the best relics in the game. Archaeology relics, not to be confused with the League's relics. And this basically gives you up to 5% more damage based on your missing health. But before you go to barrows, I would recommend you get tier 1 combat achievements, and these can be easily obtained by doing some giant mode, God Wars 1, stuff like that. It won't take you long at all. And this will give you a nifty little portal where you can skip the barrows underground area basically. So you dig all the borders up and then you just hit the portal and get to the middle room. It's super convenient and nice. Okay, let's move on to some slightly more complicated bosses. The first thing to do when you hit this, I would recommend you go get your Fire Cape and maybe even Kiln Cape. And this will teach you wave-based content. Fire Cape is a lot easier than in old school, but Kiln Cape is probably similar difficulty than getting a Fire Cape in old school. And then the rest of these bosses can be kinda skipped. You don't have to do all of them, but you need to do DKs for the best in slot rings in the game, so doing them now might be nice. And God Wars 2 teaches you using defensives really well, but I think normal mode Carapac kinda does the same thing, or even normal mode Arc Clay Core. And I know probably in League you can use damage to kind of brute force these bosses, but I think you should try and use the defensives that are recommended in guides, because this will prepare you for harder content later. So I would highly recommend going to Helver, normal mode Arc Clay Core, or normal mode Carapac. They give some nice upgrades, and on top of that you will learn how to use defensives in a lower stress environment. Okay, let's move on to mid-game PvM. And again, you don't have to go to all of these bosses. I feel like they are quite similar in difficulty, but doing at least one of them will kind of prepare you for the next step. Here we have Araxor that has multiple different mechanics, and he also has an enrage system that when you kill him a lot of times in a row, he will get harder and harder. Then we have Elite Dungeon 2, that I feel like is the easiest Elite Dungeon to complete. And it's really good for mage and melee. So if you're using one of these styles, it's gonna be really nice. Especially for melee, it gives the best abilities in the game and is basically mandatory. Rosial is a kind of tutorial boss for necromancy, and it can't be killed by any other style. So if you choose necromancy, you will definitely have to go here. There is a slight pathing difference here. I'm recommending normal mode Zuck a bit later, but if you're going to farm Rosial, I would recommend doing it before. It's gonna be slightly harder, but the buff you get with the Zuck cape is so huge here, you should probably do it now. And then we have Nex that has some great mechanics to learn, but the issue is that she prays, and she starts off by praying mage and melee, and only range can kill it freely, but necromancy avoids this because she can't pray necromancy at all. And the way she works is that the prayers rotate, but if you make a new instance, it always starts off by you ranging. Then we're finally heading to mid to late game PvM. And I think a good stepping stone here is to get your normal mode Zoc cape. And don't worry, Zoc isn't as hard as Inferno, especially in normal mode. I would say even in hard mode, because of the survivability and healing tools RuneScape 3 has, it's nowhere near as difficult as Inferno. And then what I think is one of the most important bosses to try and learn, Telos. Especially at lower end rages, you won't be getting too highly punished for your mistakes. Learning Telos' mechanics cleanly is gonna help you with a lot of other PvM, because it's a really mechanical boss that teaches you stunning, movement, ticks, all kinds of stuff. And it's really important to try and get all this down. So definitely go do some Telos here and see how you like it. And I personally think that ED3 is a great dungeon, but a lot of people hate it because of the drop rate. But I think the bosses here are pretty fun, and especially Ambassador is a great fight. And there's also a lot of cool tech in running the dungeon faster. To continue with the movement, normal mode Nakatra teaches you how to dodge stuff on the floor. And especially if you're coming from old school, this will feel pretty natural. I feel like it's heavily inspired by things like Toa, things that have a lot of moving parts, or like ground dodge mechanics. Hard mode will drive this into overdrive, but normal mode is a pretty chill experience. And I would say low end rage Zamorak is pretty doable here, but if you're getting into the higher end rages, it can be really hard. But something up to like 500% is probably really doable for you. And arc lake or end rage climbing is something you can start doing at this point, getting into like 2Ks. It gives you a lot of GP, but I don't know like what you could actually use this gear for in leagues, because the lengths are kinda not that good. I guess the gloves upgrades are nice, but yeah, if you need money, this is a great money pinter. Oh, never mind, it got nerfed, it's not, but it teaches you a bit of mechanics. And in here, I feel like you're gonna start stepping into some group content, like raids and AOD 7-man. And these are kinda stable group content pieces in RuneScape 3. And maybe in the AOD Discord or the Raids Discord, they will have leagues team forming, so you can definitely look forward to that. And after this point, I feel like you can step into high tier PvM, and these are like kinda ranked by difficulty, but not really. It's really hard to say what's more difficult for you, because a lot of things are like personal. You're better at other stuff than other stuff. And first off, we have Solak, one of the best group encounters in the game. And you can also solo the boss, but I would recommend teaming up at least with one other player, because it's a lot easier in duo than solo. And then we have Hard Mode Zoc, which allows you to combine all your Zoc capes and also gives the best melee weapon in the game. And Hard Mode Zoc is the hardest weight-based content in the game, and it's unique in its difficulty in that sense. And the Zoc fight is pretty fun itself as well. Hard Mode Brago is one of the most notorious boss fights in the game, because when it first released, it was one of the most difficult achievements to go for. But nowadays, with all the power creep, you can do it with a lot less people, and it can even be soloed. There's actually an achievement to solo all 6 weeks of it, but I feel like duos or trios are the optimal way to do hard mode Virago, and I feel like you can have a lot of fun doing this with a friend. And Virago is a boss where DPS isn't everything. There's a lot of mechanics you will have to learn as well, so you can't skip everything. So for people who like doing mechanics, this is a really well-liked boss. Then we have Hard Mode Nakatra, one of the newest additions, also known as ED5. And Hard Mode Nakatra continues from normal mode Nakatra by being very movement heavy. There's a lot of mechanics and a lot of movement, and DPS will be important here as well, so it's a good mix of everything you know in the game. But unfortunately, I feel like the group scaling here is quite terrible, and you're gonna have a better time doing this solo. Like, the additional mechanics that come from having multiple people here are really annoying to deal with, so I would just recommend doing this solo. Hard mode Kerapack is a great step up from normal mode Kerapack, and it has a lot more mechanics. It also has a whole new last phase, and this boss is really fun to do because there's like another time warp mechanic that you can use that's unique to this boss fight. So it's a really fun boss to go for, and especially if you're maging, it gives you the best in slot stuff. Then we have high-end rage Telos. 4K Telos used to be the ultimate show of skill in the game. You gained the Golden Warden title, and back when, this was the ultimate proof that you were a good PvMer. But nowadays, obviously, power creep has kind of brought down the achievement, but it is still a great achievement to go for, and the SGB and the CGS that it drops can be really useful for range and melee. A Muscut is the newest boss in RuneScape, and it is a full-on group encounter. This can be done with 2 to 5 people, but 2 is basically like challenge mode, and only I think like 1 duo has done it, and it took them a while to get it at least. But with the power creep brought on by leaks, I feel like trios are gonna be pretty comfortable here. And the Muscut also has a enrage mechanic. That means that you can farm it based on your skill. Going up to 2k is gonna be pretty difficult though. It also has some great upgrades in a good melee two-hander, a necromancy, what are those called? Nexus, that makes your ghost not heal you, so it might not be that good, but it does more damage. And then it also has a base armor set that is really good. So if you have a couple of friends to grab, going to do trio Muscut or 5-mana Muscut will be really fun in the leagues. And then last but not least, we have Zamorak High Enrage. And this is like a weird subject because I think High Enrage starts from like 1k, that's where the fight like really gets tricky. And then going up from there, there's not that much that changes. But Zamorak will definitely be a challenge, and you can do this with 1 to 5 people. I feel like solo is gonna teach you the most, but maybe doing duos or trios is the best way to actually go about doing Zamorak. And that's it, that's the video. I feel like this is a pretty good baseline on how to progress to combat for newer players in the game, and you should have a good idea of what to do as well. If you combine this with the gear progression video, you will have a good setup for combat in the upcoming leagues. I also want to mention the combat achievements here. When you're going to a boss, doing some of its combat achievements might be fun. Obviously some of them might be too hard for you now, but just trying them and seeing what you can do can be a fun way to progress as well. And the tier 4 reward is pretty nice. You get instant adrenaline from the adrenaline crystal, making PvM a bit faster. So it's a nice quality of life upgrade. And now at the end, I wanna announce something. I'm gonna be trying a bit of streaming on Twitch. I will be going back to my group Ironman account, and I feel like I wanna make a series in YouTube about combat progression with a Ironman. It is a group Ironman, but I'm not gonna be getting any clear upgrades from my friends. We will share some skilling or supplies though, because that's gonna make everything a lot easier, and this is about the combat path. I'm also banning necromancy apart from the necromancy only things, because I feel like necromancy just kinda ruins the progression of the account and it makes it really unfun. So we will be starting off with magic. And the eventual goal of the account is to get all the Grandmaster combat achievements done. So if you would like to follow the progress of that before I make the first video in the series, come to my Twitch, and you can also ask your least questions there. I'm just gonna be yapping and doing some pretty early game content. I'm thinking of going Barrows and Krill. Also like and subscribe. See ya.